Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my favorite books 2021 / anticipated reads 2022 video. My first video of 2022. I'm always so excited to start out with this video to greet the new year by, celebrating the old and looking forward to what's coming up next. I'm sitting here in, my robe and all because I'm just feeling why not? It's the new year, got plenty more time to look more presentable, but you always want to start just with a bit of comfort, I think. But I do have a lot of things coming up the docket that I'm excited for in the new year, including the BookTube Prize. Robert, the director, just emailed us the contenders for the long lists. I'm judging this year in fiction and nonfiction and not translated fiction, so that's why I only have 2 lists, but I have 2 weeks to look over these books and decide which ones I want to vote on, and I'm so excited. I'll see, what books I remember from last year and what new ones I'm going to find out about, especially, I'm sure, in nonfiction, where I don't know as much, but that's what makes me so excited to read for the nonfiction division. So, yeah, I have this on the agenda. But this is not technically a BookTube Prize video, so I guess I won't get too in the weeds of, fangirling that project yet again. I'll start with a bit of a recap just to say that in 2021 I officially read 108 books, which for me is my record. I've never read this many books before. I'm kind of surprised in a way that I read far more books this year than last year. Well, I read 90 books last year, but I was on furlough for half the year, but I think it comes down to how, debilitating COVID was for a lot of us, perhaps, and I was more in the game, I guess, this year. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I don't have that ambition to, beat myself next year. Frankly, I feel like 90 is a good number. I would like to read at least 90 books per year, maybe because my Goodreads TBR is always set at 90, so I could feel like I accomplished something if I read that many. But other than that, I don't need to push myself to get above that number. We'll just see how things go next year. I just would love for the reading to mostly be good. And I do feel like this year I was a little disappointed. I feel like I wish, especially with literary fiction, that more stuff really stuck out to me. I enjoyed a lot of it, but I didn't love a lot of it. But of course there are always exceptions, and that's why I'm so excited to start with some rambling about my favorite books that I read that are in various genres. I'll be talking about 5 favorite books for 2021 and 8 anticipated reads for the first half of 2022. I'm starting my favorite books with 2 runners-up and 3 winners because this is my channel. I can do what I want. It really comes down to how I want to place things on my upcoming literary blog post and my Goodreads favorite shelf. But anyway, moving on here. And with regards to my 2 runners-up, this is my chance to invoke the BookTube Prize yet again, because they were my favorite books that I read last year for the prize in fiction and nonfiction. My 2 favorites ended up winning the bronze medals in the official awards, so I'm glad to be on the same page with most of the other judges. And I'll start with the nonfiction pick, which was Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark, which was a sprawling biography of Sylvia Plath, over 1,000 pages long, the sort of thing I never would have imagined would capture me the way that it did. I don't even read that much biography, and to dive into something that's so granular that is able to pull out 1,000 pages of detail about her life and then to fall for it, it's kind of crazy. I know it actually is a little bit polarizing because of how long and involved it is, particularly with all of the attention that Clark pays to Plath's high school and college dates, which she went on a lot of them. And on the surface, that particular stuff isn't, what's impressive about the book, but I do think the cumulative effect of all of the research Clark did in the archives that she was able to peruse, including one that opened up just before her book was published, and the interviews she was able to conduct with people who knew Plath when she was alive. It's just very impressive. But to me, I think the thing that cinched it for me, and maybe it's something that can only be accomplished with such a large biography, is that Plath really felt like a real person to me by the end of it. I know that's weird to say, because obviously she was one that merited a biography, but the way that Clark was able to present her through all of the letters and all of the interviews, she became someone that wasn't just, a philosophical idea from what she left behind, and to me she felt very complex as a human being, someone who was so driven and ambitious, but also marred by ideas of conventionality and where she fit, and so certainly so much larger than her legacy of basically a sad poet suicide, which who was abused by her husband, and that's all people remember her for. There's just so much more there, even in the tempestuous relationship she had with her husband, Ted Hughes. So yeah, I was deeply impressed and deeply moved, very glad to find out about this complicated, prickly, and artistic genius of a woman. Moving on to my favorite in BookTube prize fiction, I have The Prettiest Star by Carter Sickels. This is a book that chronicles the final months in the life of a young man named Brian, who returns to his hometown in Appalachia when he's diagnosed with AIDS. He had gone to New York basically to find himself, where he, has a boyfriend and other lovers, and more than that, finds just a community of young people such as himself, particularly queer people who are moving past the conventionality of their upbringings and really celebrating their lives in such a tragic time when life was often cut short by this virus, which in today's day and age I guess we could have more empathy for again. But yeah, this takes him back to his hometown where he decides, when he has no one left in New York, like his lover had recently died, that he didn't want to die alone in a place that mainstream society still found him to, be gross and all of that. He wanted to see his family, with whom he had very complicated relationships, but that's what people do often when, facing death, they go home, and so he goes home. And his family, who, are part of that conventional world for the most part, have to grapple with what this means, because they still love him. And certainly in the very beginning, they don't really have much real understanding about what AIDS really is and what's actually going to happen to him. But what I really love about this book is just that Sickels doesn't have good guys and bad guys. I mean, he shows, the horror of what Brian has to deal with, not only from the ravages of AIDS, but from just the cruelty of society that's buffeted up by homophobic church sermonizing, that sort of thing. But it's not just Brian, it's also his family that falls under fire, and the ways that they deal with it, because, they might have their conventional beliefs, but they still love their son and grandson and brother, and they also have their own lives going on underneath. That was also very important to me, that, this was a multi-POV novel, and all of the people felt fully fleshed out. They weren't just in service to Brian. They had their own lives underneath them. And ultimately, I just feel like this book was a bit of the best, because it was meaty enough to be like a book club book, but it didn't, skimp on the themes and on deep characterization either. It really captured the best of both of those worlds, and it was a tragic book without being misery porn. I really do feel like at the end of it, it was, if not a celebration of all of Brian's life, an acknowledgement that he was here, that he was human, that he was worthy. And it was just very moving to see him deal with that in his final months, and to see his family come to terms and often become better people as, they spent his final time with him. So yeah, I really was captured by this one. And now I'm getting into my top 3, and there is a bit of a theme here because they all come from the same science fiction series. What can I say? I decided I had to go with it. I had to go with where I am right now, and those 3 books come from the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey, which I've been watching the TV adaptation of for years, and I'd been putting off starting the series, but I decided this year just to go for it. And I read the first 6 books, which correlate to the first 6 seasons, or I guess full show of The Expanse, because we're in season 6 right now, and it's going to be the final season, and I'm not okay, but anyway. Maybe there's something a bit subjective to this because I'm in the middle of wrapping up my relationship with this TV show that means so much to me, as I also listen to and finally acquaint myself with the books. But I feel like this is really what capitalizes my 2021 in reading, the most personal and moving, perhaps, part of my 2021 reading because of how these two worlds intersect, the TV show and the books. So yeah, there's my preamble, and now I will get into the actual rankings. And in third place I have Babylon's Ashes, which is the 6th book that correlates to this season that's on right now, which means it's the only book of The Expanse I read before watching the adaptation material. So I do feel like part of what drew me into this book was finally having to do the legwork on my own a little bit more, rather than, you know, having some knowledge of what was going to happen from what I saw on screen. Now I had to really enter the world completely on my own, and that was a bit exciting. I really wanted to see how this would stick the landing and sort of end the series. I mean, technically speaking, the book series has 3 more books after it, the last of which came out in 2021. But what my understanding was is that those 3 books take place 30 years in the future, so that book 6 could be an ending, like for the particular storyline in play. So the main action of this book has to do with a political war, as you do. This is a future 24th century event series where humanity has expanded to colonize Mars and to colonize the Belt, and have generally regrouped into cultures on those lines, Earth, Mars, and the Belt, based on their relationships to one another. And the Belt is very subservient. You know, they're reliant on Earth especially for, you know, water and air and provisions that you can't just get out in the cold of space. And they're treated as a second-class citizens who are there to basically do work for the inners. And after centuries of oppression, there's a leader who rises up called Marco Inaros, and he is a bit of a demagogue and a terrorist, and he starts this thing up called the Free Navy, which actually gains a lot of power because of other events in the series, yada yada. And Babylon's Ashes basically is about finishing this war with him. And on the other side, we particularly have the main characters of the entire series, the crew of the Rocinante, which is a multi-ethnic crew of Earthers, Martians, and Belters. So they very much are philosophically very different from Marco, who wants to see himself as separate and hate on the inners. So, and there's other personal stuff in play as well, and it's just, that's what really I love about this series, is that there's a lot of fascinating science and a lot of fascinating world building and philosophy, but the characters are also very well drawn on their own and very moving on their own. So yeah, I felt like I was challenged reading this book, especially when it came to the science that I had to figure out on my own rather than use the television show to help me along. But I think I did okay with it, and I certainly was very moved with where it ended, and it's now fascinating to watch the final season with what I remember and to guess where the story is going. It's a richer experience. In the number 2 space I have CIBOLA Burn, which is the 4th book of the series, and it's a little bit of an outlier in a way because these are books that expand the characters throughout each of the books, but this one we kind of shrink back down to the Roci crew, and they go to this new planet that's recently been found thanks to this alien technology, which is an overlay of the entire series. And the crew throughout the series has had a lot of intimate contact with this alien technology called the protomolecule, and particularly the captain of the Roci, James Holden, has some personal, sort of almost supernatural affiliation. So he's there to kind of check out, you know, the ancient ruins to make sure it's kind of safe for people. But meanwhile, there is political strife going on because we have settlers from Earth and from the Belt, and they bring, you know, their political problems from the grander story into this planet and into what's happening here. And I guess what I really loved about this particular one was a secondary character who wasn't on the TV show. I mean, actually, there's plenty of secondary characters who don't make the TV show, but this one in particular was the one who really moved me the most. He had another person who kind of played his role on the show, but we didn't know her quite as well. I mean, she did a good job on the show with that character. I really enjoyed that character, but the character in the books had a lot of background from the earlier books as well. So, I mean, I'm just saying that's one of the positives I think about reading is, about books, is that how much more in-depth they can be. So anyway, this character who I'm fangirling over is called Basia. He is a Belter. He's there with the Belter group. He had lost his son in an attack on the Ganymede station, which was chronicled in one of the earlier books. And the station really was in disrepair. This was their home. This is where they lived, and there's nowhere easy for them to move beyond that until these ring gates open up, and they're chasing the dream of being able to start over again. But he has all of this this guilt and this anger about what happened to his son, and it plays into a lot of guilt and anger that Belters have over their treatment from the Earthers and the Martians. So he becomes more radical, but then there's a crisis of faith when people get hurt, and it's just fascinating as a character. He's complex, and he's very just emotionally resonant. I really felt for him. I cried a little for him as well, and what he went through throughout this story, and I was just very impressed. It's interesting, I do think sometimes the writers do better with these secondary characters than they do with the main cast. They're kind of the people who, they come in and out of the story and they become big deals and big POVs for one book and then they leave for the most part. Whereas maybe you can play a little faster and looser with, say, the Rosie crew. Well, first of all, for most of the books, only James Holden is the POV and we don't get to know anyone else nearly as well. But, we know him on a more long-term scale, so I don't know. I feel like there's something really special about the secondary characters that they, James S. Corey, the two of them, bring in, and Basia was certainly my favorite. And the way that these themes of science and frontierism and discovery and political clashing and desires for family in the future came together in this particular book just really, really moved me. But finally, in the #1 spot, I have Nemesis Games, which was the 5th book in the series. And I guess on a similar vein, what I loved about this is the characterization. And it was the first attempt that James S.A. Corey gave to give other members of the Rosie crew their own POVs and their own arcs, apart from James Holden. Because in fact, the plot of this book is that they're on Tycho Station to repair their ship after all the crazy events from book 4, and all of the members, basically, except for Holden, decide they have personal business they need to attend to. So we follow them throughout that personal business, and again, it's about deepening the characters. It's about more than just plot. We get to know who these people are as people. We have the pilot, Alex, who basically left and abandoned his family because he was a bit of a thrill seeker, and he goes back to Mars to try to make things right with them, but it doesn't really work out. We have Amos, who had a tragic backstory on Earth, on Baltimore, in fact, the city I was born in, and he has to deal with the loss of a loved one of his only loved ones there. And then Naomi gets pulled into something with Marco Inaris, because I think I already mentioned him, and he is the demagogic leader, and her ex, it happens to be. It's a bit different than the show, and this I think is where I come down more on team show than team book, because Naomi's my favorite character. And I think what Dominic Tipper, the actress, was able to do with her, and the writers on the show were able to do with her, is they gave her so much more agency and so much more personal decision-making with her own decisions, that things weren't just acted upon her. She decided on them, and she grappled with her painful past well before book 5, which is really the only time she grappled with it. In book 5, Marco lays a trap to kidnap her, whereas in TV show 5, Naomi decides on her own she wants to save her son, which is a very flawed decision, but as a character thing, it's much more appealing to see Naomi try and fail rather than be acted upon. So it's fascinating, really, because I got to see Naomi from her own POV in book 5. And I think she's a fairly different character in the book than she is in the show, because on the show she's been grappling with these issues all throughout the series, whereas in the book it's like she'd been really almost like denying Marco's existence and the existence of the son they have together until Marco came back in her life. Like, it's almost like that's when she had to force herself sort of to contend with her trauma, because Marco was an abusive guy and remains so. And the situation is very different because she's still she's traumatized by him in both, but she hasn't dealt with it at all in the book. So she's in a lower place. She's, she's in a weaker place because she's at the beginnings of having to deal with that trauma, whereas in the show, she'd been dealing with it for a while personally and building up her personal arsenal about who she is without him. So it's interesting because I do think they did okay with Naomi, the character in the book, who is a character who's dealing with a very different sort of trauma in a way than the trauma of the character on the show. And I just happen to think the one on the show is, just a more engaging and fascinating character. But that being said, if I do have to be team book over team show, again, I think, the book has more time to play with plot ideas, which in the show feel like wham bam Hollywood magic. But I don't know, they throw enough science terms at me in the books and I'm like, okay, this seems plausible. So, I mean, I loved the book, I love the show, and this is my rambly, tribute really to both of them. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go into the 8 books that I'm most anticipating in the first half of 2021. I gotta say, I get so excited by the opportunity to go into Goodreads and to go to that, new releases by authors you've read before, and that's how I found out about the vast majority of these books. I'm still Team Goodreads over here. I gotta say, I love what they do offer, including their year in review page with all of the fun graphics and information they, categorize about all of the books that you or I read this year. So I'm going to link to mine down below because I love looking at the covers and everything and all that information. But anyway, on to my anticipated reads. Starting January 11th, we have I Came All This Way to Meet You, which is a memoir by Jami Attenberg. I've read most, but not all, of Attenberg's fiction, but I feel like I guess I am well enough acquainted with her that I'm curious enough to see what she writes about in a memoir and to follow her into this space, especially since so much of it will be about being a writer and being a published author, which is of interest on its own. I'll also know some tidbits about the books I read, how they interplay, but of course she'll also be talking about her personal life as well, so I'm very intrigued. Then on February 1st, we have Beautiful Little Fools by Jillian Cantor. This is historical fiction / Gatsby retelling. I haven't read one of these since The Great Gatsby went into the public domain last year, and this is definitely one I want to start with. First of all, because I've read a couple of Jillian Cantor books, historical fiction books, and I've enjoyed them. And second of all, this is very focused on Daisy and on the women of The Great Gatsby story. Beautiful Little Fools is a line that Daisy says in the original book. And I feel like this is always what's interested me the most in an idea of a retelling, is to go deeper into the character of Daisy. I don't know if that's contrarian of me. I know that she's written as shallow and cruel, but I just feel like there's something more there too, and a lot of it is, tied up in that line of beautiful little fools, and that as, an upper-class woman in the 1920s, she only had so many choices afforded to her. So I'm hoping that this will be a nice counter look into her and into some of the other female characters as well. On February 15th, we have The Thousand Eyes by A.K. Larkwood, which is the second in a fantasy series. I read the first book in her series a couple of years ago. I actually wasn't sure I liked it that much. I found it a little overwhelming and overly dramatic, maybe, if I remember correctly. But then when I saw that the sequel was coming out, I remembered this is very unique fantasy, I think, in the way that it deals with gods, and that the characters we're following are humanoid rather than human, so it gives it a little more of an alien feel, which is kind of fun. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe I should give this another go, and that I'm remembering it incorrectly, or that the series could grow from whatever faults it had in the first book. So yeah, I'm thinking I would like to give this a go. On March 15th, we have Fencing with the King by Diana Abu Jaber. And this is a really exciting one for me because for the past 20 years, I've been talking about reading Crescent by Diana Abu Jaber in my senior year of college. So technically a little less than 20 years, but we don't have to go too far into that. But anyway, I just remember what excited me about reading Crescent was this was my first time in so long reading contemporary literary fiction, especially in a classroom setting. I was just so excited by the idea that there was this wide open world of contemporary fiction that was still being published and that I could still read for fun after school. So I have this outsized, perhaps, opinion of Crescent, which was the story of an Iraqi-American young woman and a chef. And that particularly stuck with me as well because I was going to school in the aftermath of 9/11 and in, you know, the start of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So to give an Iraqi-American woman a voice was really special for me then, and I'm just so glad that, you know, it felt like the start of a journey into reading about like diverse voices in contemporary literary fiction, which I love. And so since then, I think she has written more books, but I haven't been aware of them until now, when this new book is coming out, which I believe this one actually takes place in Lebanon with, you know, an Arab family there. But I'm just so excited and hopeful to reread this author. I hope I haven't hyped her too much in my mind, that she can live up to all of my, you know, almost 20 years of, you know, fangirling that reading experience. But I am very excited to return to her and see how I relate to her now, all these years later. Then I think this might be either March 15th or March 22nd, I'm not sure, is Memory's Legion by James S.A. Corey, who you might remember if you watched my last section because James S.A. Corey or Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, they wrote the Expanse series, which, you know, dominated my favorite books. And this is another Expanse book. Technically, it's actually a bind-up of all of the novellas that they wrote for the series. So it's not really a continuation of the main story, but it's an easy place to find all the novellas they wrote along the way, which I'm very excited about. I really want that bind-up so that it'll be easy to read all of them. I think I've seen a lot of them adapted on the show, but I really do want to read them all myself to see what the originals are like. I'm going to wait until I finish the full series. I have 3 final books to read of the Expanse series, and then I think I'll be diving on to these novellas. I'm very excited. Then in April, on April 5th, we have Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandell. And this is her latest book. It feels like it didn't take long after her last book, The Glass Hotel, came out just a couple years ago. But of course I fell for Emily St. John Mandell, like a lot of people, after Station 11. I do feel like that was a very unique book for just a very unique topic and way that she went about exploring those ideas that aren't as prevalent in the rest of her books, including The Glass Hotel. But there are these speculative events back in this book. This would technically be a science fiction book again, like Station 11 was. So I feel like I'm being drawn back into Emily St. John Mandell's orbit, and I want to see what she does with more speculative elements in a different type of book. I hope that I will really love this one. I feel like I won't love it as much as Station 11. That one really just kind of curled itself up into a special place in my heart, but I do have high hopes for this one. On May 17th, we have Wind Daughter by Joanna Ruth Meyer. This is YA epic fantasy, or perhaps fairy tale retelling fantasy. Disclaimer, I knew Joanna Ruth Meyer several years ago. We were part of a NaNoWriMo Vidler community together, and I've been following her career ever since. And this will in fact be her 5th book in about as many years. She really has been a powerhouse in publishing, and this book in particular I think is going to be a sequel to Echo North, which was a fairy tale retelling, and I think her most popular book of all of the books that she's written so far. I don't think she has another book in the docket, or at least that she's announced yet, as coming out in 2023, but frankly I feel like if anyone can take a year off or more, it could be her. So I've really been enjoying her world building and having a lot of fun with it, so I'm excited to return to the Echo North world and especially with that lovely yellow cover. And finally, on May 31st, we have Rainbow Rainbow, Stories by Lydia Conklin. And this was very much me going out intentionally to try to find a book by an author I hadn't read before, because I like to have at least one new to me author on this anticipated reads list. And so I decided to go with Lydia Conklin in this particular short story collection. Well, first of all, because I do love short stories, so I want to have one space for them. That would be awesome. But secondly, these short stories I think will be mostly told from the perspective of women and queer people and non-binary people, and including trans women. And I'm very interested in reading perspectives from trans women. I mean, last year I read a memoir and a literary novel, so I want to jump into some short fiction as well, and just to get those queer perspectives in stories. So I'm excited. I'm hoping that it'll be illuminating and engaging. So that about covers it for me now. You can find links below to my Goodreads reviews and my Goodreads pages for all of the books that I talked about or referenced down below. We'll see how many how many links YouTube allows me to put in. But anyway, I've been rambling for a while now, and I do feel like I should get going. I have a lot of videos in the docket for the new year. I guess I'm excited to start 2022. I think I'm going to start in the next couple of days with doing a review of the 3 Michael Cunningham books I read last month. So then I can, close off to 2021 officially and then move on into 2022. So huzzah! I hope everyone is really enjoying the beginning of the new year, that you have a lot of exciting reading and other plans in store, and I can't wait to watch them all on BookTube. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.